Hello artists, and welcome back to Art at Home with Mrs. Kellogg. Well, I can't believe it, but it is February already. And do you know what happens in the beginning of February? You're right, Groundhog's Day. So I thought it would be fun to create some groundhog inspired art for our art project today. I've also included a link to a video about Groundhog's Day. I recommend watching that video before you start your art project. I think you'll learn a lot about Groundhog's Day, and it will give you some great ideas and inspiration for your art project. Now, meet me over at my workspace. I'm going to tell you more about the art lesson and the materials you will need. I hope you enjoyed watching the video about Groundhog's Day. Here's an example of the groundhog inspired art we're going to create for our art lesson today. Now let me tell you the art supplies you will need for today's project. You're going to need paper, and the size of the paper is up to you. You'll also need a pencil with an eraser, a black fine tip Sharpie marker, but if you don't have that, you can use a black colored pencil or a black crayon. You're going to need oil pastels. We are painting, so you will need your paintbrush, your watercolor set, a cup filled with water, and a paper towel. And before you start creating art, you want to always make sure you put down your art mat or newspaper. Now would be a great time to pause the video, gather all your materials, and set up your workspace, and meet me back here and we'll start creating groundhog art. Did you get your materials? Great, then let's get started. So as I said before, we are going to create groundhog inspired art. And we're going to start by drawing the groundhog. And we're going to use the elements of art, line and shape to do this. So my first step is placement. So I want to figure out where I'm going to place the groundhog. So I'm going to draw a line for where the top of the head is to where the hole that the groundhog pops out of would be approximately. So I'm just going to sketch a line here. I'm going to have my groundhog see its shadow, so I'm going to place just a circle for placement where I would have the sun. And that's going to tell me where that shadow is going to be as well. And this is where the hole would be. Okay, so now I'm going to start with line. So that line will turn into a shape. If it's easier, you can always sketch a circle here and a circle here, and then draw your lines around those shapes if that's easier. So again, I'm sketching in the beginning because I'm building my drawing. Okay, so I like those shapes. Now I'm going to start to add more shapes. So I'm going to start with the nose and draw the eyes and then the mouth in. Going to place some highlights in the eyes. And I'll be adjusting and changing things as I keep drawing my groundhog. So always remember, that's not a mistake. That's how artists work. So to draw things, look at them, and then usually most artists will change and make adjustments to their lines and shapes. Now that I've drawn the shape of the groundhog's head and body and put in the facial features, I'm going to start to add detail. So as you can notice, I'm going to shape up the face. So over here are my semicircles, more of a semi-oval here. And I'm also going to use a lot of these little triangles on top of the ears, the head, the side of the face, so it looks like fur. So as you notice, the main thing I do is I get my big shapes in first. For example, my circle, my semicircles, 2 circles for the eyes, oval for the nose, rectangles for the teeth, half circle, or think of it also as a crescent for the mouth. Now I'm going to work on the detail of the face, sketching constantly. Now I'm going to use my eraser to clean up my drawing, get rid of the lines I don't need. I'm going to shade in just lightly with the pencil the areas that I want dark. Later I'll be tracing my groundhog and using the marker or a crayon or a colored pencil to color or shade in the eyes and the inside of the ears and the mouth. By doing that, that'll help me see if I need to change any lines or shapes. Now that I've got the groundhog's face drawn, my next step is to work on the body and drawing the hole. So again, I'm going to focus on shape. So for example, for these arms, I start with a curved line or an action line, and then I'm going to go into an oval for the arms. So I draw line over line till I get what I like. I don't really worry. I could always add extra lines if I need to. So for the tail, I draw a triangle. So that's a negative space. Think of it as an air triangle. And I'm going to go up, and I'm going to make some triangles, and then going wider back into the body. Okay, now I'm going to finish the hole. So when I do that, to give it a little dimension, I'm going to come from behind the groundhog. So I would use the marker to shade this in, but I just want to show you what that would look like if I darken this area. So now that I'm finished drawing my groundhog and the hole that it's going to pop out of, I'm going to draw the sun and the shadow. Now, remember, if the groundhog sees its shadow, that means it's going to retreat back into its burrow, and there's 6 more weeks of winter. So if you draw a cloudy sky with no shadow, that means spring is near. So you decide what you would like. I'm going to show you how to put in the shadow. First, I want to draw in the sun to see where the groundhog's shadow will be cast. So when I draw the shadow, I want to make sure it's this side of the groundhog's body and this side of the groundhog's body. So if it helps, you can draw lines. And then I would make lines going across like this. And you can shade it all in with the marker, or you can do these sketchy lines and add some black watercolor in there. If you would like to do that. If you're going to add the black watercolor, though, I would recommend doing that after you finish everything else so the black doesn't mix with your other colors. There are little claws in there. Curved lines. Before I start tracing, one thing I wanted to mention about the shadow. So in these 2 examples, the shadow goes off the page. Now, you might have drawn a smaller groundhog, which is fine, and you might see the full shadow. So look at the shape of the groundhog. So you can kind of see the circle going into that oval shape. I would draw that and then shade that in. But again, if you just want to make it a cloudy day and no shadow, and that means spring is near, you can do that as well. Then when you're finished with the shadow, you don't want a floating groundhog popping out of a hole. So you need to ground the groundhog. So what you're going to do is you can put just a straight line, horizon line, and then that would show ground. Or, you know, if you want to put some rolling hills in the background, you can do that. So that's up to you. And if you want to add grass in certain areas, you can do that. Now would be a great time to pause the video, draw your groundhog in and also the background, Then trace your groundhog and all the lines in the background, and you can shade in your shadow. Then we'll meet back here and we'll start adding color into our groundhog and watercoloring the background. Did you finish drawing and tracing your groundhog? Great, then let's add some color. So for this part of the video, we want to think about the elements of art, value and color. So I'm going to talk a little bit about value right now. So think of the colors that you choose. You can choose whatever colors you like. Just think you want to have a light color, a medium color, and a dark color. So you're going to notice my groundhog, even though it's mostly brown, it's got some other highlighted colors. Okay, so I'm going to show you why I'm doing that. Well, one reason value is important is because if I were to take my dark brown color and I made my whole groundhog dark brown, if you notice when I put it next to the eyes, they don't stand out very well. So I don't want to lose the eyes and the nose and the open mouth look or the inside of the ears. So that's why I want to use a light, a medium, and a dark color. So I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So anywhere that it's really dark, I'm going to put my medium value. I could even use a light value too. And I'm going to mix my darkest value, that reddish brown, into it. So I'm going to blend my colors together. And I want to add some white. If you're putting a cloud in the sky, you might want to add your white oil pastel or crayon into that cloud. So when you use the watercolor to paint over the cloud that you've applied the white oil pastel to or the white crayon to, it's going to create a resist. So after I'm finished adding all my color to my groundhog, then it'll be time to paint with the watercolor. So I'm going to use oil pastel or crayon into my groundhog like this one, and then I'm going to watercolor the background. So when you get to that part where you're finished coloring in your groundhog and then you're ready to add the paint, make sure that every time you change colors, you want to make sure you're washing your brush in the water, and you want to make sure you're using plenty of water to get the paint to move. Remember, if you don't use enough water with watercolor, the paint won't move. And when I'm watercoloring, I also want to make sure I have a paper towel close by. Now it's your turn to color in your groundhog and then watercolor your background. That's our lesson on creating a groundhog. I hope you enjoyed the lesson, and I hope you learned a little bit more about Groundhog's Day. Now, always remember when you are creating art to relax, have lots of fun, and keep creating.